And what does an active sex life looks like as we get older? Is it once a month? Is it once every couple of months? Like, you get to negotiate those things. It doesn't have to look like 20s version of sex. And I think that sometimes too, we think if it doesn't look like that, then it's not good.
What are you seeing that people are struggling with within a marriage when it in relates to sex?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's so much to it. The most common thing I see is
What's up, fam? This is Kevin and
Tanya.
yeah, man, we coming at you with another episode of Couples Connect. But today we got a specialist. We have someone who knows about this stuff, who's going to break it down and hopefully help all of us to better understand, how to deal with sex within the marriage. So without further delay, man, please give it up for Miss Janice Garcia in the building. Welcome, Miss Janice. So Janice, tell us a little bit about your background and why you kind of into this whole space of sex. Why is that was so appealing to you to get into this industry of being a therapist, right? To help people along the way in their sex journey.
yeah, so of course I did my master's in counseling psychology. And with counseling, some people decide to be a generalist, right? But for me, I identified early, like, this is an area where I'm really comfortable talking about it. I mean, I've had my own experiences that I can bring into this. It just felt natural. It felt like a natural fit for me.
Yeah.
So I went on to like do further education in the field and, just to make myself more qualified to have these conversations. And the thing about sex therapy, it's so vast. So you're always learning new things. There's always a conference you want to catch. There's always an area that you want to know more about. There's always a client coming in with an issue that you probably want to know more about, right? So it's always evolving, always evolving. So I love the space, and I have great support. I work with a supervisor. I work with a group of consultants. So I feel very supported in that space. And I do my own readings and conferences and things like that.
Awesome.
I feel really good about it.
How many years now you been in this space?
It's been 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah, it's been
Okay.
5
All
years.
right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know before the cameras came on, the conversation was getting good again. Right, we got to watch that, baby. And get all into it before the cameras come on. But if we can tap back into some of the stuff that we were kind of talking about, before the cameras come on, that'd be great. So mainly, this is a couples, right, relationship type podcast,
Yeah.
and you counsel married couples and stuff like that a little bit, individuals as well. What are you seeing that people are struggling with within a marriage when it relates to sex?
Yeah, so I mean, there's so much to it. The most common thing I see is how stress affects arousal and desire.
Mm.
I think a lot of us don't make that connection very well as to how stress is received in our bodies, how we think about it, what tools we have. I mean, sometimes we see people walking every day and we think they're just walking just because, but that is their stress management
Yeah.
strategy, right? So we need to have those tools to feel like we're not drifting away from our partners in relationships. And also, I see changes in just the life of the couple, right? So there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows. And I think sometimes going into a marriage, I think for a lot of people, they think getting married is the end. I've done it, right? And there's not a lot of work still needed to continue to maintain that. Another thing I see is after infidelity has been introduced to the relationship, sometimes it's hard to bounce back from that. So people working through betrayal, betrayal violations, all of that can be really hard to rebuild trust and connect again in that way. So I see a lot of those things. And I have people who are virgins who I've never done this before. How do I develop that confidence in myself so I'm not being abused and things like that in a new relationship? So you just never know what you're going to get on any given day. But I'm prepared and equipped, to handle whatever walks into the office.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So you basically see it all.
I see a lot. Yeah.
And sex is so broad, right? So many different layers of sex, because I think a lot of people, especially if they've had sex before they were married, they bring a lot into those past experiences into the marriage.
Yeah.
But So let's talk about some of this stuff that we
Yeah.
kind of, you know, that you kind of deal with, that we've talked about many times. The man and the woman, right? They having, we talked about sexless
Yes.
marriage. You want to speak to that a little bit, baby? That you kind of brought it up.
Yeah. So we've had conversations with friends. I deal with or see a lot of women because of, the field that I work in. And we don't have a problem talking about, this kind of stuff. And a lot of my clients are, not a lot, but quite a few, we talk about sex, and we talk about how they're not having sex in their marriages or just in their relationships, but particularly their marriage. I have a lot of clients who are married, and I just wonder how, and why is that? I know that we go through droughts, where we don't have sex and we do have sex. And you mentioned earlier about, when we get married, we think this is the end all be all, because during a time when we were just dating, we had a lot of sex. It was hot. It was popping, We were, yes, doing it in different places and, that kind of stuff. And when you get married, it's like, okay, what happens?
I had a good back.
Well, that's
But still strong back then.
were fearless, because when you were just dating, there were times where you would take chances in having sex in a car, at the park, that kind of stuff. And when you get married, it's like we go from that to not having sex at all. So I've asked the question, like, why is that? Are you having this conversation with your partner? And it's like, no, because I don't know what to say, or he's dealing with sexual dysfunction, or I'm dealing with menopause, that kind of stuff. And then it just becomes a sexless marriage. I am not dealing with menopause right now. But one day I probably will. I don't want to get to the point to where I don't want to have sex with my husband.
Oh, you bet not get to the point where you want to have sex.
Or not enjoy it.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that?
Yeah. So, of course, some of these conversations are very uncomfortable, right? And we have to start somewhere, whether it's confronting the issue, right? And I find that for a lot of persons, sometimes acknowledging, like, this thing doesn't work the way I want it to work, it's a lot. It feels like a hit to, the self-esteem. So creating a safe space for the conversation, first of all, right? So if your partner is going to tell you that, you don't want to come back with a slur, or, you don't want to be disrespectful, right? I do think there needs to be safety for these conversations. And if it doesn't exist, it therefore makes it really hard to come to your partner and say, I'm really struggling with this thing, right? So we just don't talk about it. So maybe we need some communication tools. Maybe we need a way to bring it up gently so that we can come up with a solution for it. And also recognizing, like, do I want this marriage to be sexless? Some people are just pretty happy with how things are. Or we want to be careful they're not getting those needs met elsewhere, right? And if we are, let's talk about that too. Like, are you self-pleasuring? Are you taking care of it so you don't worry about it so much? I think that needs to be part of that honest conversation. But I think I was mentioning earlier that we want to be careful to not measure quantity of sex as the marker for a great relationship, because you can be having a whole lot of sex and not talking about serious issues. So I think finding that balance where what else is going great in the relationship, right? But how we can take what's going great, how we're achieving that, and maybe applying it to the areas where we want to grow and utilizing our tools. A lot of people have health benefits. They have these premiums they pay every month. They don't want to use the insurance to, come to therapy and things like that, right? I'm like, you have those resources, use it. Sometimes your company pays for you to go to counseling, right? With your EAP program. So I like to say, use those tools. First, identify what you want to work on, right? And then use those tools. Also, I like to say, because part of our work as a sex therapist is to make sure that physiologically things are good. When last we did blood work, do we know where our hormones are? Do we do regular testing? Like, all the things that tells us, okay, my body's good, or I might need to do this or do that to get to where we want to be. Because just like men have their issues, we too, have our issues where, we might experience dryness and things like that. So we want to make sure we're working on some of those things as well. But it first starts off with an acknowledgement that something is a little bit off here, and can we work on it, right? Do we want to go back to an active sex life. And what does an active sex life looks like as we get older? Is it once a month? Is it once every couple of months? Like you get to negotiate those things. It doesn't have to look like 20s version of sex.
Yes.
And I think that's sometimes too, we think if it doesn't look like that, then it's not good. It doesn't match up, right? Like you were mentioning your back, right?
I need to bring that back up, Janet.
So sometimes, yeah, you might have back issues and you have to discover new ways to do it where you're not causing more harm.
For sure.
All of those things need to be considered. I can't be doing the things I did in my 20s, in my 50s, 60s, you know, thinking everything's good, right? And if we want to achieve that, we might have to work out, exercise, strengthen the muscles, all these things. So these are good conversations that couples can have, but because sometimes sex is so taboo, it's hard to say, struggling here.
Yeah.
Can we seek help?
Yeah.
Or even like we don't talk to other people about our problems, right? So that could be a block.
Yeah. You know, I realized, I've come to realize a long time ago that sometimes even if you're having sex, right, with your partner, you're married, you've been married for years, but you can be having a lot of sex, but it doesn't mean that it's enjoyable sex for one of the partners. It could not necessarily be enjoyable, and that could be for a mental disconnect for some reason, whatever, right? But a lot of sex doesn't necessarily equate to pleasure and joy and stuff like that, right? So, what do you consider for a married couple? What is great sex? for in your mind for a married couple, because it may be, because I don't think it's just the physicality of it all. It has to be a certain connection. My wife is like this all the time. She's, it's not just about the physical. She wants a deeper connection mentally, right, emotionally, and stuff like that. And then that filling those cups, I think, pours over into the sex piece. So, in your mindset, what's a great sex life for a couple? How do you define that?
Yeah, it's a really good question that everyone answers so differently, right? Because some people can have the sex without that mental connection, and some people just can't, right? But I would say mutually satisfying sex would be my definition of great sex, right? Mutually satisfying. We both want this. We're both enthusiastic about it. Even if it starts off really warm and then it gets hot, right? For some people, it takes time to get into it. I think mutually satisfying, right? But we also have to define what is your formula, what gets you there, and what gets you there, right? So we both on the same pages with that. Because I do see times where people just go with the flow and then they say, yeah, I didn't like that later on, months later, right? Which feels, a little bit tacky, right?
Right.
But I think mutually satisfying, that would be my definition. We're both doing this and we enjoy it,
Yeah. Man, sex is one of those things that's I tell my wife, lots of times, like, I want to be free, not just in our sex life, but just in a space where we're connected, where we can talk about anything, we can explore anything, and but especially sexually, because there are many times, especially now, the place that we're in, the space that we're in at this age, with our kids at this age, and we're in a different space. Just like she mentioned, back in the day, I mean, it
Nothing.
It wasn't nothing. It was pumping anyway, right? But now we have to be more considerate and about where, how, when, and all that stuff, and then also the consideration of the other person, right? Like, she's at, if certain things are not done at home, she's not really connected. So there are many times we have sex, but I can tell she's not connected, right? What does that look like for people to really create an environment where both parties are like connected in that space to have a great experience? Because I don't think there's, maybe just for many couples, it might just be, and I'm gonna just say maybe the man who's like, he just want, have his orgasm. Basically, he just want to get it in and have his orgasm, and then he's done. He's good. But the wife is left, empty.
Right.
Right. what's a healthy place where what should men do? Speak to the man. What should a man do for the woman?
Yeah, so for a lot of women, it's a lot. There's a lot up here, right? You kind of it starts sex starts in the brain. We always say that the brain is, our sex organ, really,
Yeah.
right? So connecting outside of the bedroom, whether that's, talking like, babe, I see you, I hear you, taking something off the plate. Stress is the number one killer of arousal. We know that prolonged exposure to stress bring down the libido. We're not thinking about that when there are 1,000 things to be done in the house or the children needs, are not met, because they always need something, right? We're not thinking about, oh yeah, sex. And, because so for us, we're thinking about, yeah, the kids and, we have this order of priorities a lot of the time in our head.
That
right?
is so true.
So connecting outside of the bedroom, what needs to be done? What can I take off your plate? Right? Because once again, we know stress is the number one killer. Right? So how can I make you feel less stressed? How can I just give you a massage? Nothing, no big intentions, just a massage. We all know that doesn't work. But massage your feet.
Tell you that, right?
Let's start with something light.
Hey,
That always lead to something else.
don't get naked then. Massage you.
So we can help your feet. Or let me just massage your hands. Little things like that can help with stress. Creating a home where either there's music, you're playing love songs, you're, creating an environment where it can inspire that. It could be easier to lead to that rather than maybe hostility or feeling like you just can't take on her moodiness today. And maybe sometimes we do need our space when we're moody.
Yeah.
But I think connecting outside of the bedroom, anticipating her needs, things like that, I think men can do really well. Another thing I say is studying your woman's cycle. I think a lot of men miss that hack. If you can study your woman's cycle, you have the cheat sheet. You know when she's most likely to want to engage, when her hormones are dropping, all the things. I think that could be a great way to really study her and know her. So on a month-by-month basis, you know what to expect. You know when are good times and when might not be a good time, right? Because we have these low periods where we don't want to talk about that. And there are periods where we're energized and yeah, we smell you and yeah, let's go at it, right? So paying attention to all of those things can suddenly alleviate so much of the disconnect, right? And stress that we feel around sex.
That's good. What other cheat codes you got for the fellas? Hey, brothers, I got you, man. What are some of the other cheat codes for fellas to know besides because that was good, right? Learn your wife's cycle, so you can kind of better understand, right? So
Match up to that.
Yeah. So what are some other cheat codes that man should understand when it
Just
comes
listening to
sex?
her. Just listening to her. Paying
Listen.
attention to her habits, what could throw her off, what can, maybe cause a little bit of a shift between you. I think after so long in a relationship, you need to know her well enough. Like I know if you don't eat, yeah, you're gonna have this headache and nothing's gonna happen. Making sure little things like that. It sounds like really petty, but let me bring you lunch. I know you said you didn't eat breakfast, right? Let me bring you things that we miss. Like sometimes I think we think there's like a grand gesture required, but it's just little things. I see you. I heard you said this morning. I'm listening, paying attention. Goes a long way. Long way.
You taking
I'm taking mental notes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm taking mental notes.
So I'm always delivering these things. I'm like, yeah, there are cheat codes if you just pay attention,
So I'm not gonna leave the women hanging.
Yeah.
We need cheat codes too. So what is something that we can do? Because I know for me and a lot of other women that I talk to, the husbands or the boyfriends or whatever,
Yeah.
they're more of the person who wants sex all the time, all the time, all the time. And we're just not there in that space all the time, all the time. So how can we get there? Like, how can we prepare our mind?
Mm-hmm.
Like almost every day you got to prepare your mind for it because you don't know when,
Takes work.
it takes work.
It takes work. Yeah. So, for us, I think we talked about that last time, body care, feeling good about your body, whether that's working out, getting your wax, feeling good. I think I was telling you last time, like when I get a wax, I'm more sensitive down there. So a little wind might pass and I'm like, you know what? think tonight is the night, right?
Yes.
So little things like that, or just putting your mind in that place, whether it's whatever you're listening to, the music you're listening to, the books you're reading, right? A lot of us read those romance books, not just because, I mean, we want to kind of replace these things, right? So little things we can do in our day, even if it's just dressing up or deciding to be nude around the house. And I get it, you have kids, but maybe when you lock your door, we're sleeping naked tonight, right? There are little things that we can do, even if it doesn't immediately get us there. It might. It might. Like, let's just cuddle naked. Let's watch a show naked tonight.
So that
Yeah.
makes
Thank you. Watch a show naked.
I dare you, right? Just sit in your bed and just,
just enjoy
little
each
things
other.
like that. Yeah. But also, for some of us, like, we live in this strong Black woman, independent, allowing our partners to show up for us sometimes, bringing that softness to the dynamic can be great too. Also, sometimes we might have to set a reminder. Let me send him something naughty. Let me I know what he likes. Let me just send that message and see what it does for him, right? So I think sometimes we have to be a little bit selfless. I don't advocate for all the way selflessness, but in these times, even when we're going through a hard time, you can still tell him it smells good. I love what you're wearing today. Oh, I like that shirt. You look really good in that. Like little things like that go such a long way, right? But I know when we're stressed, we're not thinking about that. So that's why I stress on managing our stress so that we can show up in those ways, Yeah. But it's really person by person because every relationship is so different. Everyone's going through their own different battles. So it can be hard to speak to everybody with these messages.
Am I soft? Do I show up soft?
Do you show up soft, meaning?
Like what Janice just said. Do I create that softness? My energy, is it soft? Does it make it easy? Or do I bring a little bit of masculine? Because sometimes too, I think that can get in the way of.
They both have a place, right? But maybe sometimes we can decide what day needs what, right? Do I need to be the hostile leader today because I need to get everyone out of the house by 7 a.m.? Or can I just lean back and chill? Like, no, you got it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you because I know I think you would like more of that if I'm more nude or,
You think? You think?
Sometimes we get into bed and he like,
Are you wearing dresses to bed?
I'm gonna invite you just for a second and now visual. I sleep because she has it freezing cold in there. I sleep with a shirt on.
Okay.
Because if the cover come off me, I want to still be a little warm.
Yeah.
Nothing else, just shirt. She sleep on with shorts and no top. So we she got on bottoms, I got on top. We up in there trying to cuddle. We don't it ain't vibing. You know what I'm saying? We don't feel no skin to skin. You know what I'm saying? But that's just an area we need to work on.
yeah.
She used to sleep like me, naked, but things have changed. But anyway,
Yeah.
so tell me this. So, what about those traumas though? Because a lot of people bring those traumas into the relationship from childhood. What would you say if someone that was dealing with some traumas sexually and they were trying to overcome that because it's causing problems in their current relationship, in their marriage? How do they deal with some of those traumas? And I would think that a big part of that is communication. But what else would you suggest?
Can I add to that?
Yeah, for sure.
That's a great question because it's one that I was going to bring up too as well, especially for people who are listening and they're in their engagement part of it, wanting to be married. If you're not, I feel like if you're not healed in that area, or if you don't have someone who is gentle with you in that area, it can be really hard in that area of your marriage when it comes to sex because you don't have anybody who can quite understand it, and you don't quite understand it yourself.
Right.
So along with your question, like how can,
Yeah, so
even for
true.
somebody who is dealing with it right now, being 15 years, 10 years in a marriage and still not healed from that, that childhood trauma, that, who's been molested or who's been sexually abused or raped or anything like that.
Yeah, so trauma comes up a lot. That's the heavy side of this work, right? For everyone, that looks so different. Ideally, we want for that to be talked about before the relationship goes into marriage. But for some people, they don't even have memory of the trauma until later on, right? It might be 10 years later and you spank me or you touch me a certain way. And like, what's that? Like, you feel weird about it. Like, I have people who start getting memories of their molestation or, sexual abuse later on, right? So that can be really dicey. But I do like to say, talking about it as soon as these triggers and things come up for you, but providing that your partner is a safe space. That's why we want to choose safe partners, right? So we can talk about these things with ease. And then we like to bring some of that into premarital counseling or counseling as a couple if you've already been married. So you can figure out, how do I share this? How does my partner need to show up for me so I can continue to feel safe to share and work through that, right? Because we can heal trauma in healthy relationships. But if our partner doesn't know, they could still be doing something that's triggering for us, right? So I do think it requires you acknowledging, yes, I've been through this and I might need to still work on that, but also being able to share that with your partner, providing that they're a safe space for that, right, to work through that together. Because I do see those triggers come up later on, and that's where sometimes it can be confusing. Because we had great sex when we were dating, but now that you're in the marriage, you're done. What happened with that? And then we're recognizing some patterns, right? But it's a case-by-case basis, like a lot of trauma work. But we do say, acknowledge, like, something is off. Talk to someone about it. There are lots of different therapy modalities. If you don't want to talk through, you can do some sensation work, somatic therapy work that requires more of healing it in the body. So there are things we can do for that. And then once you feel safe, then we can bring in your partner so they can create that safe space for you outside of therapy. Yeah.
How can the partner to the person who has had sexual trauma, how can that partner show up for that person, like, without criticism, without judgment, without pointing fingers or making that person feel bad? How can that partner show up for?
I think you just said it. Yeah. Without all of these things, we want to be a safe space. Like, I want to comfort you. I want to give you somewhat of what you didn't have, which is someone to protect you when these things were happening, right? So showing up as, I'm your advocate. I'm here for you. I believe you. All of those little things go a long way, right? And finding out, like, what sex might look like now that we're discovered that we have those triggers, that we have these things that can lead us to disconnect. How much time you need sometimes when you fall back into that pattern, right? Or, fall back into like an episode, right? So having all of those discussions is so important. But oftentimes we see people who, just getting to the first part of acknowledging the trauma is hard. Some people don't even believe themselves. Am I making this up? Did this really happen? All of these mind games are happening for a person, right? So even if we have a step-by-step, the first part can be so hard. It can take years to get to acknowledging, like, this thing really did happen and I really need to get help for it.
This episode of Couples Connect is sponsored by Just Like You Hair Care System. Introducing Just Like You Hair Care, the perfect solution for healthy, growing, moisturized hair. Our hair growth oil is enriched with essential oils like calendula, lavender, rose petals, also enriched with nourishing jojoba oil, promoting growth, reducing breakage, and restoring scalp health. Follow with our moisturizing leave-in cream to lock in hydration for smooth, manageable hair all day long. So you get to feel confident with thicker, stronger, and deeply moisturized hair. Our products are made with all natural ingredients and is designed for women or anyone who want a holistic approach to hair wellness. Shop today and experience the transformation. Just Like You Hair Care, your hair, your confidence, and your journey. The link is in the show notes. Now back to the episode.
So tell me this, man, why do you think that's, I mean, I think everything that we name, right? The trauma, the abuse, and all those things, it can come with a lot of shame around sex, to where now a lot of people, they don't want to talk about it, and they kind of, it's an embarrassing thing, or it's something that brings a lot of pain, when they deal with it. So for a married couple, it's like a lot. They're stacked against a lot, already coming into a relationship.
Yeah.
And to try to heal some of those things, pre-married, if through counseling and all those things. But even at some point, they kind of, I think each person has to kind of go within themselves, right? And also still being considerate, especially if there's some trauma in the relationship, but also go within themselves to really, because I'm gonna relate this to more personal situation with us in terms of, I think with us, our sex life has always been amazing. That's one thing that we definitely connect in. But I think, and there may be other people that's like this as well. For me as a man, I had to really look inward myself to really try to connect with my wife, where she was at, and that's like more of recent, of trying to really understand, maybe some things that I know for sure that she's dealt with,
Yeah.
Sexually, and trying to be a little bit more considerate in those situations. So it's and it may be something that she don't even recognize that I'm doing, but I'm trying to understand and try to be a little bit more, have a little more empathy in those situations, to try to where we can have more pleasurable sex. Not that our sex is not, because I mean, listen, we put it down, but at the same time, it still sometimes it used to feel selfish because of how I know that she might have not been connected to the experience. And I was just, and once we're done, I got my, sex tank fulfilled, but she was empty, right? So I got to be considerate, and I didn't want that. So to try to be considerate of your spouse, you know what I'm saying, when they're dealing with maybe with some of the traumas and stuff like that, I think is super important.
And doing your own work, so even as you're
Yes.
going through this as a couple individually, like, what does that mean for you that your wife has been through this, right? Because we have these deep-seated beliefs around sex, right? I mean, there's some people who might go with, you wanted it, so you had sex. Oh, that's good. You had sex. Like, we view even trauma, we view so differently between men and women, right?
Yeah.
If a man has his first experience at whatever age, even if it's like an older woman, he gets cheers, right? Like, great, you got it done, right?
Yeah.
But for a woman, it's so different. Like, so I think digging deeper into what does it mean for me to know that my partner has been, because now you have to shift gears.
Yeah.
Like, for a boy, that's good news, right? But for a woman, it's not. It means that this was not consented. You probably didn't even enjoy this. Like, there's so many things at play. So going deep and finding that empathy regularly, because we're getting those mixed messages about what sex means for both genders.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just that reminder, like, has she really been through that?
Wow.
And I need to like affirm and build up and all of those things. Because some days you might be good. You might not remember this for years. And then suddenly you hear a story. It's so easy to get triggered. You hear a story about another kid, or you find out your perpetrator did it again. Like, so many things can be going on for us up there. So just leaning into that empathy, having these conversations, just going deeper. I think that's it. But doing your own work, like, what do you need to challenge to show up consistently in those ways? Yeah.
I think pleasure for, when it comes to sex, pleasure for a man, sex is different for a woman. Her pleasure, his pleasure. But I think when they can both meet in the middle, right? The experience is so, it's amazing.
It's magical.
magical, right? It's one of those moments you feel like, yeah, I need an award for that performance, girl. You know what I'm saying? I need an award.
Yeah.
But I think there's still just so much disconnect in the bedroom for many couples. It's unfortunate. You know, it's unfortunate. And we definitely we've been there with some disconnect, and you know, we definitely. But the cool thing about us, I think we've definitely had more great experiences than not. But we know how some of that stuff can exist, you know. So
Yep.
so some of this speak to the maybe the idea of someone who, you know, from a man's perspective, who might be ED, right? Is a big situation, right, with a lot of men, right? Erectile dysfunction.
Yeah.
And that's an issue with a lot of, could be high blood pressure, working out, all of the different things for sure. How can a woman, you know, because I know a lot of men out there, especially brothers who probably got blood pressure is a major thing. And that's a health concern. It's not something, I just want the brothers to know, it's not something that should be, you know, ashamed. That you should be ashamed about. It's a health condition that you can find help for, right? So it's just something that you can find the help that can help you.
Mm-hmm.
How can a woman who has a husband or lover who's dealing with that situation, what do you think would be the best way for her to kind of, you know what I'm saying, just be a little bit more sensitive and just help out, you know, because men got those big egos, right?
Oh yeah.
You know, how can you deal with that?
It starts from the moment we agree to those vows. When we say death to us part and everything else, we have to acknowledge that if we're going to grow old together, there's going to be some things, you know, and it's a gamble. You just don't know what it's going to be. So it's acknowledging like, yeah, things might go wrong.
Yeah.
Right. But of course, we'll do something about it. We'll talk to our doctors. We'll do our blood work. We'll do whatever is necessary to get us back. Right. And especially for men, I think a lot of men struggle with their own stress management. Right. I work with men, and a lot of men just absorb all of it, not recognizing how it shows up physiologically. Right. Blood pressure is usually the first sign they recognize.
Yeah.
Usually the first sign, you know, but before that, there might be unhealthy eating. There might be binge drinking. All of these things show up too. But usually the first time we start to take it seriously is when, you know, our blood pressure is, you know. So acknowledging like, yeah, there is stress. I'm stressed, right? And I need some sort of resource or routine around that, you know. And of course, for wives to create a space where if you want to go running every morning, if you want to work out, you know, like that needs to be part of your life. That's a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
You know, and just for women too, like we need those strategies to help us with our stress. I think sometimes we think about stress as just this thing, but it affects us. You know, we're tense, we have knots, you know, all of those things are stress.
Absolutely.
You know, so that is the first place. But of course, for women, recognizing like, our partners are human. And I think for a long time, we've just put men on this, you know, really high pedestal that, yeah, nothing could go wrong. You need to show up consistently and do this every day without issues, right? But I think acknowledging like, yeah, they're human.
Yeah.
You're human, just like us, you know?
Absolutely.
So there's that, right? But just having safe conversation, honestly, around these, recognizing it's sensitive, right? And once again, we're challenging the taboo-ness. Like we don't talk about these things, right? So there's a part of it that's uncomfortable because it's not the norm. We didn't see our parents talk about that, right? So there's a part of it that's, yeah, I want to create that safe space so we can talk about these things. Our bodies are changing. If we're going to grow old together, a lot is going to change. And we're going to see that, you know, live, right? And that's just one of those things. But just being able to step up and say, you know what, I'm going to go see my doctor, my urologist, my PCP, get those tests and, you know, get whatever meds I need, right? We've come a long way, you know? So there's something for everything.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's so true, man. You know, and I think early on, you know, being over 50 now, my mindset is totally different around certain things. And I think early on, the whole idea of a man, you know, like I said, sex and numbers, it was a macho thing, it was an ego thing, how I viewed sex.
Yeah.
and now a little bit definitely older, the way I view sex is totally different. For me, the macho piece of sex now for me is not nowhere near as the maturity about sex and trying to understand more of the evolution of things. That, things will change, like you just mentioned. And then you just got to work on it. You just got to work through those things. And then sometimes some of those sexual things that happen with one partner, to have another partner that's there to support and help and, and just to really be, someone that's just really have a little bit more empathy in those situations to kind of
That softness.
right? To kind of help you and they realize that we can get through it, right? So how can, say for instance, are you smiling? Okay. So talk to me, say if it's vice versa, right? So if it's a woman's, what's some of the things that a woman, I know we talked about menopause, right? What are some of the things that a man may need to understand if a woman's going through menopause, if a woman's, whatever, let's just say menopause, let's just go there because I think maybe our audience is maybe in that more mature phase of their life and that may be on the rising or if they're not already going through it. What a man is to expect? What should we expect from a woman who's going through?
Yeah, I mean,
when it comes to sex, as it relates to sex.
So a lot of women report vaginal dryness, low libido, just not having any desire, any excitement, any wanting for sex during those times. But once again, these things are so different for every woman, right? So we do see some of those first signs. Of course, being attuned to it, like, hey, you haven't seen your period in 12 months? Okay. Are we talking to your doctors? Do we know what's going on for you? Have you been experiencing any changes? And I'm not saying you have to be her doctor, but at least know what's going on with her body as well, right?
Yeah.
Because I see that disconnect very often too. Just knowing what's going on with her body. Asking her what changes she's experiencing, what's going on for your breasts, what's going on for your moods. Do you feel these highs and lows? Do you have extreme lows? How long are they lasting? And once again, you don't have to be her doctor,
Right.
but you can pay attention to her patterns. I noticed last month you had a whole week where you were really struggling to get out of bed. You didn't shower or whatever.
Right.
I know you probably shower, but little things like that. Once again, if we're paying attention to her, we know when things are changing, but also sometimes women don't even pay attention to themselves, right? So asking those questions could maybe bring up, oh yeah, that did happen, right? And then we can share that and talk about it. But once again, menopause looks different for a lot of women. Some people get hot flashes, some people don't. Like, you have to ask the person, what is that experience like for you?
Yeah.
So
I'm not going through menopause right now, but I am
know.
going through the peri,
Yeah.
and I'm having the hot flashes right now. And that was good because you just said, as far as like the question he asks, and for men to pay attention to your wives, ask the questions because it makes us feel like you care about what's going on with us mentally, because it's a mental struggle up there. So ask your wife or your partner those questions. If you see that she is kind of off, investigate. How can I help? How can I show up for you? It doesn't cost anything to do that. Switching gears a little bit, when you and I met before, and I knew that we were going to have this conversation around sex, some of my girlfriends asked me a question about how do you get your husband, or if you engage your partner, to participate in something that you want to participate in. I don't know what that may be. It can be anything. I'm just going to throw something up. They want to try anal sex, or they want to go outside of their marriage, or they want to bring somebody in their marriage, or whatever. How can they, because a lot of times I think that some couples or a person think that they're the only one going through that experience. Like, I can't talk to anybody about this because it's embarrassing or whatever. How can the person who wants these things express this to their partner, and how can that partner show up without judgment?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, first thing that comes to mind is just safety in the relationship, to have these questions pop up, which I think is absolutely necessary for these conversations, right? especially if we're talking to a partner who has one view of what marriage needs to look like. The other thing I'm hearing is perhaps sometimes, just therapy. Like, do you need, if you feel like you don't have that, going into therapy and bringing that in, of course, you can preface it with, I have some things that I want to talk about, and I think therapy might be a safe space to explore that together, because the therapist is listening in and asking tough questions, right? That could be a way to go about it. But you have to recognize that even if we're excited about trying something new, our partner is not always there yet. So figuring out what might be a good place to start. Like, I do see young couples too, who were each other's first, and sometimes sex education, right? So maybe I just don't know how to do the things. I don't know how to do the things safely, right? Or I don't want to start inviting people into our marriage and then things become chaotic, right? So we can do sex education for those things we want to introduce, but we can also go to therapy to explore how other people make those relationships work, or these, what you call it, hall passes, or whatever they do in their relationships, right? Giving your partner a pass, to explore something, outside of you. People do that. But sometimes it's really like anxiety about how will my partner respond, right? So we have to deal with that anxiety and make sure we're asking things in a way that doesn't, I don't know, it has to come out softly, really. Everything comes back to softness, right? If we're jumping in and saying, you know what, I always thought I was going to go do this, or, I'm just going to go do this, instead of saying, I've been thinking about what would it mean for us to explore this? Or let's learn more about this sexual position or this thing people are doing and see if we can explore it. I think the way we go about it is more important, But once again, the relationship has to have that safety for uncomfortable conversations, which some relationships just don't. You don't know what's going to come out of your partner's mouth when you say, you know what, I want to try, Now they're thinking, okay, like there's so many things that we can associate with that, right? So yeah, it's I think that's softness, how we bring it up. What are you trying to achieve? If we try this new thing, So sometimes it's breaking it down a little bit more can be helpful, but I think therapy is a great space to create that, some of those dynamics. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But I think it's great people are starting to think of other ways to be and have sex,
It's not just missionary. There are other ways to get involved with your sex life.
And then I see historically, women have been more passive about sex, where, I just take whatever you give me, and it's okay if I don't have an orgasm. Like, I see that a lot. I think we're coming into an age where women are figuring out, okay, what I like, what do I like? How do I tell you what I like? And all the things, and they're exploring themselves and they're using different toys. So I think they're more vocal now, but I don't know that men have caught up to, it's not just what I deliver. Now I need to give her what she wants, what's going to satisfy her. So I think there's that shift happening as well, with couples. Yeah, because women haven't always been vocal.
That's so
We
true.
just take what we get, and okay. Yeah, we have a baby, okay. That's it. Like sex was, for reproduction, right? So now that it's becoming more pleasure focused,
How important is emotional connection when it comes to being intimate with your partner?
Once again, the brain is the largest,
Yes.
Sexual organ. Sex starts in the brain. There has to be that connection for a lot of us. Some people do well without that. Once again, we cannot talk to everybody, right? Some people do well without that. They can have casual sex. They can do that easily.
But I think that those are the people who are just out having sex, right?
Yeah.
Just, going from this person to that person. They have no emotional connection. But when you're in a relationship, whether you're married or not, that is, I believe that is the most important, one of the most important parts
I
of
think so too.
your relationship. You have to have that emotional connection because it connects everything, the brain, the heart. Then it goes down to the body parts, that kind of stuff. And if that's not being fed, I don't know.
Yeah. So
I hear a lot about that as well.
Mhm. So it is important. It is important. That's why we talked about seeing her, you know, recognizing like, yeah, you're more than just, my pleasure thing, right? You're a person, So we want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to feel respected, considered. All of those things tie into what shows up in the bedroom, It all ties in. Yeah. And we want to know, like, if that body part didn't exist, would you still love me? So there's so much that we need to feel, And once again, some people do and some people don't. Some people easily can get into sex without thinking about all of that. But some of us, it's really tied to. It's a gift of, right? Oh, I get that from you. So now I wanna do that with you. We see that a lot.
Well, this is something that we can just talk about along for a while because there's just so many compartments or departments to sex and intimacy, all the ways you can do it, and all the ways it can feel good, and all the connections and all that kind of stuff. But I know we're getting to our end time. I wanted to ask, are there any steps you can give couples, when it comes to their marriage relationship and how they are with each other? I know it looks different for everybody, but what are some steps or tools they can use? Did you have any question before?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, so depending on where the couple is, and since you mentioned your audience is,
Mm-hmm.
maturing, I would like to say, of course, we need to understand where our body's at. We need to understand how our body's functioning, what we need to do to get to a place where we're okay and we can manage from there. We need to talk to each other about our bodies and how it's changing. The other thing would be managing our stress, figuring out what's going on for you, talking about the stressors. Sometimes I do assessment and couples are surprised by what shows up on each other's stress, the top stressors, right? So it tells me that they don't often talk. They might be reacting, but they're not talking about what is the thing that's getting me there, right? Also, for people who are not having sex, who are not sexually active, start soft. Start soft. I like to say, like, watch shows together. Find a thing, create a routine around intimacy, whether that looks like cooking together, sitting on the porch with your coffee together, talking about the news together, creating those routines, those rituals that can eventually lead to sex. If you want that, once again, some people are okay with where they're at, right? The other thing I would say is adding more things to the menu. Penetrative sex is not the only way to achieve an orgasm, right? We were talking earlier, hand jobs, dry humping, fingers, pleasuring, oral. Like there's so many things on the menu that we can do that doesn't require you to, be penetrated if that's not what you want right now, right? Once again, those parts are not always available for that consistently, right? So put more things on the menu. Try different things. Be nude together. Go to a nude beach. Like there's so many things that couples can do.
You mentioned convention earlier. So what is the convention thing about?
So I mean, you can go to depending on what the couple is into. I mean, there are kink conventions, there are nudist things, there are swinger things. I mean, there's always something that couples can explore together if they're into that stuff. That sort of lifestyle stuff. But that we might be talking to a different couple with that. But these are things that couples are doing, like to keep the spark and have fun. And there are lots of things that couples can do. And first place to start is therapy for a lot of them, because these conversations are not always easy. You don't know what to say. Sometimes you get stuck in a blame cycle, in a shame cycle, and therapy can help with that. It can help move the conversation forward. Yeah.
Sex, the more I talk about it, or we talk about it, the more I begin to understand how more complex it is.
Yes, it's very complex.
Because there's just so much, there's so many layers to it. And it's just not enough to ever really uncover all the different facets of sex.
Yeah.
In a conversation, right? Because it's so many, and it is subject to each couple, right? It's every couple has their own thing that they're dealing with within that sex world that may be different from another couple.
Mm-hmm.
Another couple is a different thing and then a different, right? Everybody have their thing that they deal with when it comes to sex. But we got to bring you back on.
Yeah.
Yes, we want to continue to dig deeper into this conversation because I think it's an area that a lot of couples are suffering in. And I think this is just good, healthy conversation around sex where hopefully we can help other couples to open up a dialogue, right, around sex and what they need and all that stuff and how to navigate through to where they can both find what they truly want in their sex life. So any last thing you want to just kind of say to couples, man, who might just be struggling with sex?
And can I say this to add to you? It's about bringing her back. I know you work with tools like toys, and a lot of times, men may need to learn the parts of the woman. And I know you work with that as well. Yeah. And sometimes women don't even know their own parts. Yeah. Maybe you can bring, when we have you again, you can bring, something like some prompts, I guess, back to explore it a little bit more.
Yeah. So I'm always advocating for sex education. The Velvet Box DFW is an adult store. It's women friendly. It's a great space to learn. Like you walk into the store and they're so eager to teach you about each toy, what it does, how to use it, all of the things. And I think that's an amazing resource. They also do sex education classes. It's online. You can just go on, choose one. I think it's like $10, pay for it. If you want to learn more about butt stuff, if you want to learn more about how to spice things up in your 60s, your 70s. I mean, there's so much resources in their catalog that people can just go on and just watch together, right? And talk about things a little bit more. The other thing is books. I mean, there's so many books. One of my favorite one is Come As You Are. That's a really good one by Emily Nagotsky. There is, what else? There's so many. But that's the first one that comes to mind right now. But there's so many books that help us have the language and talk about these things differently, and even provides us with tools and assessments we can do together, right? Because we're always evolving and changing. So just using those resources like the adult store, they provide sex education classes and books. There are lots of books on these things. Yeah.
Well, I love it, man. Good stuff, man. Thank you, Janice, man, for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it. And we absolutely have you back on because we want to get a little bit deeper into it. And then, like I said, maybe bring some of the toys and stuff that you can kind of talk about and educate people on. But hopefully this was very helpful, man, to our listeners. Learning about sex education, especially within your marriage. I think it starts with continuing to want to learn, right? You want to learn your spouse. You want to learn, them and what their needs are. Want to learn yourself, right? Your own body,
your own body,
right? What makes you happy, what's pleasurable to you. So hopefully this was helpful for anyone out there, man. We definitely would love you to tap in with Ms. Janice if you need any counseling. We're going to have her information in the show notes, man. But other than that, man, this is Couples Connect, Kevin Tan, and we out. Peace.